Mo did something in 1978 in relationship to Katie and her brother and their father.
Right.
That is a secret he keeps in conjunction with Katie's father that hangs like a dark cloud over everything Mo does.
And it's one of those things that, you know, I like it when there's something that the reader knows that, you know, other characters don't know. As part of that, you kind of get us walking through Mo's life with him. I mean, it's an interesting technique.
It's something, in fact, I won't say who the editor is, but when after the Stasio review came out, you can imagine that all of a sudden big publishing companies started to call. And one of these publishing companies called and said, well, you know, you've got the whole arc to the story in the first book. Well, how can you do sequels? And I said, watch me, pay me and watch me. And they weren't willing to do it. It was an editor who was willing. I'll tell you off camera who.
Okay. All right.
And so I like challenges as a writer. What writer doesn't? And all I remember is, although I'm not a huge Hitchcock fan, Hitchcock would always let the audience know what was going on, but the characters didn't know. So
I'm not sure we knew that in North by Northwest.
No, that was
Isn't that the exception?
That's the one where you sort of are.
Right, because aren't we out there in the field with the plane and we're all going, what?
What's going on?
But you're right. Generally, it was that kind
the
of
MacGuffin.
thing.
He would let the people know what the MacGuffin was, but not the protagonist. He or she would never know. And so, what's wrong with that?
Absolutely nothing. Well, you went on then to write Redemption Street, right?
Right.
And that was, to be honest, the first book of yours that I read. I went back and read Walking the Perfect Square afterward, but Viking published Redemption Street.
That's correct.
Which I thought was terrific. And more than that, my mother, the tough critic, fell in love with Redemption Street. She really liked Mo.
In some ways, Redemption Street is my favorite Mo book because it's like the stepchild. It's the one that was the least successful. It's the one that people who love Mo love that book the most. Because that's Mo closest to me.
I see.
That's Mo and I sharing very closely some issues. In fact, that book is based on a true story. 3 girls from my high school were working in the Catskills, as many kids used to do, and they were in the workers' quarters. And
was this on the Borscht Circuit?
In the Borscht Belt.
Call it? Yeah,
in the Borscht Belt, and in the Catskills, at a second-rate hotel. And there was workers' quarters. They didn't live in the hotel. They lived in a flimsy wooden building, and it burnt down, and 17 people died, and the 3 girls from my high school died, and one of whom I had a huge crush on.
Oh dear.
So, and she was a poet, and she was somebody who inspired me to write. And it was the kind of crush where I never, ever spoke one word to her. It was that kind of crush. And so I always knew that just in its own, just that, I knew someday I would use that. Because that's just, the setup there is just so emotionally devastating. And it was for me. Plus, that's the book where Mo really struggles with his Judaism.
Yes,
really,
it is.
In an open way. And it makes people very uncomfortable.
Well, my husband's Jewish. I am not, and he's very comfortable with it. I probably know more about Judaism than he does.
No. I mean, I'm comfortable with it. I'm comfortable with people. I don't believe in censorship. I'm very comfortable. I think this was one of the problems. Let me get on the soapbox for just a minute. One of the problems we have as a country is we don't have discussions about things. Someone says something and they immediately get labeled, he's a racist. And we never then have the discussion. Look, however you feel about Don Imus, you're welcome to feel. But that was a lost opportunity, I felt. First of all, there was enough hypocrisy to go around the planet several times in that issue. But that was an opportunity. If he had stayed on the air and, sort of try to change and see what would have happened, and then maybe have a dialogue. But instead, we just label and vilify people. Sometimes they deserve it, but sometimes they're lost opportunities. Well, I think Redemption Street, I can tell you, it made my editor very nervous. It was,
really?
It was once Redemption Street is an interesting story because that's the only book that I've ever written that was very heavily edited.
Hmm.
I mean, I was made to water down a
That's
lot.
very
A lot.
interesting.
I wouldn't do it again. I would never do that again. But I learned. It was the yellow. Not to go off on a small tangent here. The Yellow Stars.
Right.
They're an anti-assimilationist Jewish group. When I heard the original draft of it, they wore the striped uniforms of concentration camp victims.
Right.
They shaved their heads. They ate a very meager diet. And I was told, no, you can't do that. You
That's
can't.
so interesting when you think about, I can't think of the guy's name, but the British author John Boyne, who wrote The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. I mean, just putting it right out there last year.
I think they were uncomfortable with me. This subject made them uncomfortable. Of course, they weren't Jewish. I don't think Jews are very uncomfortable with it, but I think it makes some people very uncomfortable. Plus, the group that the sort of implied white supremacists, they were all-out white supremacists in the book. And, there was a much broader, more intense magnifying glass on these individual groups when I first wrote the book, and they were very uncomfortable with it.
Well, I certainly wish I'd read the original. I think it's a marvelous book, because I said it was the one that I read that really grabbed me.
Thank you.
Then I went back to read Walking the Perfect Square, and then I read the James Deans, which I liked a lot.
Yeah, I like it too.
And that one won you several awards. It won you the Barry Award, the Seamus, and the Anthony, right? Which are all mystery awards, meaning good going read.
Nice work. And I was nominated for the Edgar.
That's right.
And the McCavity and the Gumshoe.
The whole Megillah.
Right, the whole. I speak
a mitzvah there. Yes. Have you read this whole debate about Michael Chabon and?
I want to read the book first. I want to read the book first.
I've got a couple of copies.
I saw in the store.
We have them in the store. Michael was kind enough to send them to us. And I think he's going to come over and do an event. And I thought Sarah Weinman's blog was so interesting when she said she was one of the few critics going to write about the book who was a native Yiddish speaker. But she has not. She's lost a lot of her Yiddish because it's not something you can easily do.
My parents spoke Yiddish, not when they didn't want us to understand things. And
do you know what? My father, who was not Jewish and in fact, grew up in Iowa, was never in a Jewish community or anything else. He used a lot of Yiddish, which I think was very much part of the vernacular in the 1930s when he was young.
Well, watch movies from the 30s.
Exactly. I mean, I think that there were a lot of words then, he would say things like Mensch and...
Right. Well, it's very funny. Well, first of all, German culture was also a big influence, and Yiddish is just a dialect of German.
Right.
But I saw a movie the other day, Taxi Cab, with James Cagney. It was from the early 30s, and in it, Cagney's driving a cab, and he stopped at the street, and it's in New York, and there on the street is an Irish cop, the stereotypical Irish cop, and a man yelling at him in Yiddish, full-blown Yiddish, for 5 minutes. I mean, not every other word, but screaming at him, and like my grandparents, calling him all these, you goyish cop. I mean, and Cagney, leans out the window and starts speaking to him in Yiddish.
How funny. There he
it
is,
was
the
great.
quintessential Irish guy.
Yeah, and because that's the old clue about the thing about New York is, if you grow up there, you're a little bit of everything.
I think Faye Kellerman's fourth book for Rena Lazarus and Pete Dexter was the one set in the Hasidic community in Brooklyn. I've gone blank on the title, but I'm sure that's the one where they go back to New York and, there's the whole bit, I think it's like two contesting rabbis.
That's a big issue.
Yeah.
Which sect?
Exactly. And then there was a guy named Rosenfeld or something, wrote one book for Mysterious Press that was set in the New York Jewish Diamond community.
District,
so you're on
47th Street,
47th
which is down the block from Mystery Writers of America's office.
Okay. So, I mean, there have been some great crime novels that,
of course.